The story begins when Ally receives a call from her mother the day before Thanksgiving. At first, Ally is excited at the thought of a cozy family dinner, one of her and her children's favorite traditions. With fond memories of family gatherings, the smell of roasting turkey, and the warmth of the holidays, Ally looks forward to sharing that joy with her children again. But this call brings an unexpected truth. Ally's mother, in a rather gentle tone, announces that this year's party will be different. She says it will be a smaller dinner, just for adults, and no children will be attending. A huge shock comes to Ally's mind when her mother tells her that, instead of having her grandchildren join in, they will have an intimate dinner, for adults, and only the parents and people like Ally's brother, Daniel, will attend. Ally felt like everything was falling apart around her. She asked, confused, if it was just her children who were being excluded. Her mother replied vaguely that, although they loved their grandchildren, Ally's children, like Emma and Lucas, were too energetic and would disrupt the atmosphere of the party. Hearing these words, Ally couldn't help but feel hurt. She knew her children were just children, with a little more energy, but that was no reason for them not to be welcome in the family, especially when they loved their grandparents so much. The sense of injustice was even more pronounced when Ally's mother continued to cite the reason that her brother Daniel's children were always calm and graceful, making the party more enjoyable. This was obvious to Ally. Her family, especially her mother, always put Daniel's children first and saw Ally's children as nothing more than a nuisance. This feeling of being left out and treated unfairly was not new. Ally had experienced many times in the past when Daniel's children were given priority when it came to family gatherings. The times when her mother couldn't come to Emma's concerts, but was always present at Daniel's children's events, or the Christmas gifts that were always given extra to Daniel's grandchildren, while Emma and Lucas only received small gifts. Her mother's words about Thanksgiving really awakened the pain that Ally had tried to forget for so many years. She felt like she had nowhere to go, no longer had a truly loving family. The dream of a happy holiday with delicious food and the warmth of family was shattered in an instant. Ally knew that if she didn't speak up, what her mother had just said would only be the beginning of discrimination and injustice that would last forever. When Ally received the news from her mother about her Thanksgiving plans this year, her first feeling was hurt and disappointed. Because for Ally, Thanksgiving has always been a time for the whole family to gather together, where warm memories of connection, love and understanding are formed. However, with her mother's words, everything Ally had expected from this festival became meaningless. Her mother's announcement that Emma and Lucas, the children Ally loved and cared for every day, would not be attending the dinner, made her feel like her whole world had collapsed. Ally felt like she was not only rejected, but also treated as if she was useless in the family. She had sacrificed a lot for this family, from helping her parents when they had financial difficulties to taking care of the household chores without ever complaining. Ally devoted herself to her family, but all she received in return was coldness and contempt, especially from her mother. Her loyalty and sacrifice were not appreciated, but instead were blatantly rejected just because her children were a bit active and not suitable for the party her mother wanted. What hurt Ally even more was that her mother compared her children to those of her brother Daniel, and made it clear that Daniel was always the privileged child. Her mother's words about how Daniel and his wife, along with their children, were always welcomed because they were quiet and refined, only made Ally feel that she and her children could never be on par with her brother in her mother's eyes. She realizes that, although she saved the family business from the brink of bankruptcy, in her mother's eyes, that was never worth the effort of creating an image of a perfect family, in which Daniel and his children were the brightest stars. When Ally asks her mother if it's all just an evening and she can attend without her children, her mother continues to insist that it's not personal, but clearly, her mother's words cannot hide the truth. Her mother and the rest of the family simply don't want Ally's children there. They don't want her children to disrupt the peaceful atmosphere they desire, which in reality is just an excuse to remove Ally's children from their lives. This cruelty and disrespect makes Ally feel even more that she has no place in the family. Ally's pain deepened as she recalled the times in the past when her mother and father had always sided with Daniel, not because he did anything outstanding, but simply because he was the firstborn son and was always considered the favorite. The times when Emma attended school activities and her mother couldn't come, while Daniel was favored by his mother to attend all his children's events, were painful memories that Ally could not forget. Although she always tried to convince herself that the family would change, that the love and support between family members would be more equally expressed, the reality was not like that. At this point, Ally realized that what she needed was not acceptance from a family that did not appreciate her, but freedom and the right to protect her children. She could not stand to see her mother and father continue to ask her to sacrifice for them without appreciating what she had done. If she continued to remain silent and accept this unfair treatment, she would forever be the outcast in her own family. And that was when Ally decided not to attend the Thanksgiving dinner this year. This decision was not just because of the incident of one night, but to protect her self-esteem and the respect for the children she loved. Ally could no longer stand to see her family continue to treat her children as children who were not worthy of love and attention. She knew that she could not change her mother's way of thinking, but at least she could stand up for herself and her children. As the seconds passed after her mother's call, Ally stood there, her hands shaking as she gripped the phone. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, but it was all too clear. Anger and pain surged through her, a wave of emotion so strong that she had to stand still, clenching her fists to keep her composure. Her children, the innocent children that Ally loved and cared for every day, were being removed from the family. The children who considered their grandparents the greatest joy in their lives, and now, they were not worthy of participating in a family party. Not because they were wrong, but because they were too active, too noisy, too annoying for people who would never find them good enough. They were children. She had heard her mother say so, but in Ally's heart, the feeling was inconsolable. She could understand her mother's concern about a cozy party, but the truth was, her mother had done something worse than she could have imagined. Ally was used to being left out, but this time, not accepting her children was the final straw. Enough was enough. She couldn't stand by, couldn't let her children endure such indifference and discrimination. So Ally made her decision, and this time she didn't hesitate. If they don't want my children, then I don't have to be there, she thought to herself. The pain was raw, but inside her, a fire of resilience burned. She knew that this wasn't just about one evening, it was about a relationship, a life she had sacrificed for this family. No matter what, she couldn't let her beloved children live in an environment where they weren't respected. Immediately, Ally disconnected from her mother, and then, an important decision was made: she would no longer participate in any calls from her family. Her mother would not be able to drag her back to those unreasonable and unfair demands. Ally was no longer the daughter who always tried to please everyone. She was no longer the daughter who always tried to ease all the tension in the family by obeying. This time everything had to change. With an iron determination, Ally stopped answering her mother's phone calls, did not reply to her father's messages, did not participate in even the smallest requests. She did not do so out of revenge, but because she realized that if she continued to sacrifice for them, she would forever lose the right to be a mother, the right to protect her children. The most important thing right now was not what her family could give her, but the freedom in her own soul. She did not want to live in the suffocation of relationships that had hurt her for so many years. The more Ally thought about it, the more she saw the difference between her and Daniel. He was the child who was pampered by his mother, respected by his family, even though he never had to do much to receive that favor. Meanwhile, she had to endure the constant pressure to prove her worth, to make her family realize that she deserved what she had. But now, Ally did not need to do that anymore. She had strong confidence, was determined to protect her children, and most importantly, she knew that she deserved to be loved and respected not just because she was someone's child, but because of who she was. Her heart was determined, a strong belief that she could not continue to live in compromise. She couldn't let her children live in a family where they were never considered important. She had spent years searching for recognition, for love, but now, she understood that love had to be given without conditions. And if her family couldn't give it to her and her children, then they were no longer a part of her life. Ally stood up, turned her back on the past, walked steadily, with a strong determination in her heart. She wouldn't let anyone, not her family, not anyone else, decide the worth of her children. And this time, she stood up not just for herself, but for everything she loved and protected. When Ally made the decision to protect her children, she did not expect that this would lead to intense battles with her entire family. One morning, while she was enjoying a peaceful moment with her small family, her phone rang again. This time it was from Daniel, her brother. Ally was not very surprised, but she could not help but feel a surge of anxiety in her heart. She knew that this call would not be easy. Ally, why do you have to make things so complicated? Daniel's voice rang out through the phone, full of fatigue and annoyance. Ally did not answer immediately, only feeling a surge of anger in her heart. She knew exactly what Daniel was thinking, what he was about to say. Every time there was a conflict in the family, Daniel was always the one who stood in the middle, acting as a bridge, but in reality, he had never stood on Ally's side. And this time was no exception. I didn't do anything, I was just protecting my kids, Ally replied, trying to stay calm, but her voice couldn't help but betray the frustration. She had had enough. Daniel and her mother had always been on his side, and this time was no different. He didn't understand how she felt, didn't feel the disappointment and hurt Ally had endured over the years. Daniel sighed, as if he didn't understand why Ally was making such a big deal out of things. Mom just wanted a quiet party, it wasn't such a big deal. Emma and Lucas just needed to sit still for a bit and everything would be fine. Daniel's words felt like a slap in Ally's face. Her kids weren't toys that could be sat still at someone's request. They were adorable, innocent children, with hearts full of love and admiration for their grandparents. Yet in her family's eyes, they were just troublemakers, with no right to participate in precious family moments. I'm not a troublemaker, Daniel, Ally said firmly, they're just normal kids, and they love their grandparents. They don't deserve to be thrown away like this, just because they can't sit still like your kids. She couldn't hold it in anymore, her frustration, her resentment, it all poured out. Have you and Mom ever thought about how I feel? I've sacrificed so much for this family, and in the end, I'm treated like this. And now, you and Mom continue to treat my children like useless children. Both sides were silent for a few seconds. Daniel certainly didn't expect such a strong reaction from Ally. He couldn't understand the pain she had to endure. Just because Ally had always been the one to hold the family together, doing everything without a single complaint, he had always thought that she would accept everything, even the fact that her family continued to treat her and her children badly. A few seconds later, Daniel spoke up in a disappointed tone, as if he was trying to convince Ally, rather than take her side. Ally, you always make things so complicated. Mom just wanted a peaceful evening. Why do you have to make things so tense? It's just a party, nothing important. Ally looked at her phone screen, feeling the tension rising. She felt suffocated, as if she were standing in the middle of an uncontrollable storm. Anger and frustration surrounded her. Daniel would never understand, because he had never suffered the discrimination she had. He didn't feel the pain of a mother, seeing her children removed from the family life they loved. So what do you want me to do? Ally asked through gritted teeth, her voice soft but powerful. What do you and your mother want me to do to be accepted? To be treated fairly? Ally continued, her voice more strained than ever. Just accept my children, the way you accept yours. That's all I ask. And then, Daniel fell silent. There was no explanation from him. Just a heavy silence, as if he had realized that Ally was no longer the easygoing person she once was. Ally had severed this unfair relationship, and she knew, no matter what, this family would never understand her. She was determined to protect her children, not just for their sake, but for her own. She will no longer stand in the shadow of anyone in this family. When Ally decided that she would no longer be the shadow of her family, no longer sacrifice and endure, she knew that her life would never be the same. What her mother and brother had done, no longer concealed, was simply water flowing from a glass. Ally was not only a fraud, the elder sister of this family, she was also a woman who had fought all her life to assert herself in a comprehensive world. She understood that only by being strong could she protect what was hers, protect the values she had always held, regardless of everything. A feeling of agitation rose in Ally's heart as she remembered the times in the past when her mother and brother only saw their children as disorders, as instrument disorderers. They had always loved and favored Daniel's children, and every time Ally reminded her children, she only received silence or vague words in return. And now, when her mother directly told her that her children did not deserve to attend the Thanksgiving dinner, a deep sadness rose up in Ally. This time, she could not accept it anymore. She was tired enough, had lived in the shadow of this family for too long, now she would live on her own terms. Ally's decision was not only a refusal to attend Thanksgiving but also a complete severance of all financial ties she had maintained with her family. Ally had helped her parents for so many years, from paying for their daily expenses to supporting them when they had financial difficulties. She never complained, never asked for anything. But now, looking back, she realized that her sacrifice was not appreciated, but only taken for granted. She could no longer accept the person who was the ATM for this family. She could not continue this job. And so, Ally decided to end it all, no longer allowing them to benefit. At this moment, Ally felt not only anger but also a rising sense of victory. She had done the right thing. She had chosen to stand up for her children, and by doing so, she had protected herself. No more sacrifices for those who did not appreciate her love and dedication. And so, Ally had cut off her financial ties with her family. She had removed all the support she had given them. A sense of liberation washed over her. No more burden of responsibility, no more unreasonable demands from her mother, no more calls to her just for money. When her mother continued to call every morning, send messages every afternoon, Ally was no longer busy. She ignored all her mother's persuasion, did not answer the calls, did not respond to the messages. She knew the purpose of those calls, they didn't want love, they just wanted money. But Ally understood that what mattered was not what they wanted from her, but what she wanted for her life. She didn't need the approval of this family anymore. She didn't need to please them. When Thanksgiving came, Ally spent time with her little family, without stress, without worrying about being present at the family party her mother organized. She and Liam, Emma, and Lucas happily appeared in her house, enjoying the peaceful and happy moment. She didn't feel lonely or lacking in love, because she had what mattered most, love and support from her family. She knew that this was her real family, not the ones who abandoned her and her children. A few days later, Daniel called again. Ally wasn't surprised, but her coldness became more obvious. "Ally, you can't keep making things so tense," Daniel said, his displeasure clear in his voice. "Mom and I just want things to be okay." Ally couldn't hold back any longer. She replied tensely, "Mom just wanted a peaceful dinner, but she didn't accept my children. Do you know how she treats my children? And now, when I decide not to keep quiet anymore, you call me the one who makes things tense." They were both silent. Ally knew that Daniel would never understand her pain. He was only worried about having family harmony, while not understanding how tired she was. She didn't need to fake harmony anymore. No one could control her life anymore. She did the right thing, and now it was time for her family to learn to live without Ally's sacrifice. After all that happened, Ally decided not to let anyone in her family affect her life anymore. She chose the path of self-reliance, and eventually, this family would have to learn to live without her. She cut, not out of hatred, but because she knew that sometimes, to move forward, you have to let go of things that are not worth it. And that, Ally did. After a long period of family conflict, Ally realized that she had spent too much time trying to please people who never appreciated her. When her mother and Daniel continued to call, send threatening messages and try to apologize, Ally knew it was time to stop. She could no longer live in a cycle of manipulation, could no longer live with cheap apologies just to maintain a fake family. That was when Ally decided to take action. This decision was not only about protecting herself and her children, but also about taking back the power she had lost over the years. Ally was no longer just a daughter trying to please her family. She used to be the one who helped her family financially, always there when needed. But now, she would not do that anymore. She would not allow her family to continue to take advantage of her. Instead, she will use her own strategy to retaliate and regain control of her life. One morning, when everything is still peaceful in her house, Ally begins to prepare for the next step. Her mother and Daniel will no longer be the ones who can control her life. She decides to rebuild everything herself, but this time, without unconditional sacrifice. She will no longer support her family with her money or strength. This decision, although painful, is necessary. And she will not allow them to continue to treat her children as unworthy children. Certainly, her mother and Daniel will not easily give up the control they have had for all these years. But Ally knows that she has her own strength, the strength that comes from building a solid career and a life that does not depend on anyone. Once she decided not to contribute anymore, they would have to face the consequences of abusing her kindness. Thanksgiving came, and Ally decided that, instead of attending the family party, she would spend all her time with her most beloved children, Emma and Lucas. Her whole family was happy, creating wonderful memories together, without discrimination, without deprivation. But that was only the first step in Ally's strategy. She did not simply sit and wait, she had a detailed plan. Not only did she not go to Thanksgiving, she decided that she would no longer have a financial relationship with her family. She did not want to live in this torment, in this suffocating relationship anymore. When her mother called back and tried to persuade her, Ally did not answer. She did not need to justify or explain anymore. She decided that she would not respond to any more persuasion from them. The calls from her mother, the messages from Daniel, all of them were worthless to her. She was no longer a part of this family. She had cut them off, not only to protect herself but also to make her family understand that this abuse had to stop. However, Ally wanted not only to create a distance from her family, but also to show them that taking advantage of her was a big mistake. Things were not as simple as they thought. She decided to make her family face the truth, that she was no longer dependent on them and they would no longer benefit from her. And when they felt that they had lost Ally's financial source, they would understand that they had made an irreparable mistake. When her mother continued to try to contact her, Ally did not bother anymore. She knew that, no matter what temptation or hardship she faced, she would stand firm. She was no longer afraid, no longer worried about how her family would view her. She realized that the trade-offs of all these years were not the right investments, and now it was time for her to invest in herself and her children. Ally could no longer tolerate manipulation, and she knew she had won. Ally's story is not just about revenge, but a lesson in the power of freedom. She did not let her family continue to control her life, but instead, she created a new path, a path that she and her children could walk freely without being bound by expectations or manipulation from people who did not deserve it. And in the end, Ally won, not through bitter revenge, but through being strong and steadfast in protecting what mattered most to her, her true family. When Ally decided not to go back, not to continue living in the empty promises and manipulations of her family, she knew that her life would turn a new page. It was not an easy decision, but she knew that she had no other choice. She had to shake off all the pressure from her family, the unreasonable expectations that her mother and Daniel always placed on her shoulders. Ally was tired of being the in-between for so many years, the bridge between the broken relationships in her family, but never being recognized or loved the way she deserved. On Christmas Eve, when her mother and Daniel once again appeared at her door with false apologies, Ally could not help but feel filled with resentment. They only thought about themselves, thinking about how to take advantage of her further, and once again put the responsibility on her to keep the family harmonious. But this time Ally no longer felt the need to explain, to please them. She was too tired and it was time to end everything. She didn't even want to see them anymore. Her mother and Daniel continued to send messages, call, beg her to come back, as if the past months had not happened. She had heard their persuasion too many times, but could no longer accept any more excuses. Each call, each message was like a sharp knife stabbing her heart, because they were just empty words, lacking real feelings. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath and thought about what she had been through. Those days were so heavy, when she could never please her family. How much she had sacrificed for them, only to receive coldness and cruel words in return. She did everything, from taking care of her family to sacrificing her finances and strength, but in the end, everything was rewarded with contempt. So why should she continue to live the way her family wanted? Why should she continue to try to prove herself? These questions kept echoing in Ally's head, and each response from her mother and Daniel was a confirmation that she had done the right thing. She would not go back, she would no longer be the child of a selfish family. Nothing would change, because to them, she was just the one who had to do everything for the family. But she could not accept it anymore. She could not continue to live like a shadow. Christmas Day came, but not in a joyful atmosphere with her family, but in a wonderful release. Ally's whole family sat together, happy and peaceful, without worry or tension. Emma and Lucas laughed as they opened presents. Liam and Ally held hands, enjoying the simple but meaningful moments. No need to compete with expectations, no need to worry about pleasing her family. She clearly felt that she had won, not in money or obedience, but in freedom. The feeling of freedom enveloped her, but it was not an emptiness, but an unprecedented peace. No longer having to keep in touch with her estranged family, no longer having to constantly worry about their acceptance. She no longer had to prove anything. She had found freedom in cutting off toxic relationships, and that brought her a sense of peace, a sense of self-respect that she had long lost. Ally had done the right thing. She had chosen not to go back, not to let herself be used again. Even when her mother called on Christmas Day with apologies and persuasion, Ally didn't waver. She knew that if she went back, she would be the person her family wanted her to be, someone with no voice, no say in her own life. And then, when she looked into Emma and Lucas' eyes, happy together in their cozy home, Ally knew that she had everything she needed. She had a real family, people who loved her without asking or having to give anything in return. And in that moment, Ally understood that sometimes, to move forward, you have to give up the things that don't deserve it. She had given up the family that loved her, but now, she had found what mattered most in her life, the unconditional love and respect she deserved. When Ally decided to cut all ties with her family, she was not simply ending a part of her past, but also taking an important step in her own healing journey. She was tired of living in the shadow of a family that had never shown her love and respect. The discrimination, stigma, and futile attempts to gain her parents' approval had cost her precious time, self-esteem, and faith in family love. Both her mother and Daniel had grown accustomed to using Ally as a tool for support, not only financially but also emotionally. They had always seen her as someone who would meet their every need without question, and when Ally decided to stop chasing after her family's acceptance, everything changed. This was a turning point in Ally's life. She no longer wanted to live to please people who didn't deserve her love and dedication. This process was not easy. Every time she recalled the painful memories, the abandonment of her family, Ally felt her heart ache. But she understood that letting these wounds control her life was unacceptable. She decided that she would no longer let the past burden her future. Ally chose to heal herself, end this toxic relationship, and walk on the path of freedom and happiness. The first lesson Ally realized was the importance of loving herself. She spent her whole life seeking validation from people who didn't love her properly. She sacrificed, did everything she could to make her family see her as worthy, but in the end she realized that love and respect must start with herself. No one can love you properly if you don't love yourself. Ally's decision to leave her family was a strong one, but it was also an act of self-love. She no longer accepted being used as a tool to serve the needs of others. She understood that she had value and deserved to be loved unconditionally. The healing process was not always easy. Ally faced loneliness, anxiety about the future, and disapproval from her family. But she knew that if she continued to live in an unfair, insincere relationship, she would never be able to find true happiness. When she looked into the eyes of Emma and Lucas, the children who loved her unconditionally, Ally realized that true family is not the people who try to control you, but the people who love and respect you for who you are. The second lesson Ally learned was the importance of setting healthy boundaries in relationships. We all have the right to set boundaries with others to protect our own peace of mind. Ally used to be someone who always put her family first, always trying to please them, even if it meant sacrificing herself. But she realized that protecting her own inner peace was the most important thing. And cutting off toxic relationships with her family helped Ally realize that healthy relationships cannot be built on one-sided sacrifice. Confronting her family in this situation made Ally realize that people who truly love you will never ask you to give up yourself to please them. She did not need to continue to sacrifice and tolerate unfairness. Every relationship must have mutual respect and must be built on a foundation of true love. The third lesson is the strength and determination to protect her own happiness. Ally chose the hard path when she decided to stand up for herself and her children, but she won. She did not let fake apologies or manipulation from her family hold her back. She chose the path of freedom, and it was the right choice. Ally's story is a powerful lesson for all of us: never let others determine your worth, and never lose yourself in a toxic relationship. Love yourself, create healthy boundaries, and do not hesitate to walk away if you realize that you are not being loved properly. True happiness comes from loving yourself and choosing the path you deserve. Ally did the right thing. She left her family who did not appreciate her and created a new life where she and her children could be happy without being controlled by anyone. Her story is a clear testament that, sometimes, to live happily and freely, you have to dare to step out of your comfort zone, even if that means facing loneliness.